Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode. And this is an episode that is a weird one because I wrote all my notes for it, I was prepped for it, I did all the things, and then that disappeared. So I had to rewrite all the notes, so I'm probably going to miss stuff today, but it's kind of on brand for what we're talking about today. So for those of you who are new, this is a question and answer based podcast. If you have a question for the podcast that you would like me to talk about, which is what I'm going to do, I'm answering Alana's question today. So if you want your question answered, go over to fearcastpodcast.com, send me a question over the submit a question link. You can find me over to Instagram. I'm Fearcast Podcast over there. Send me a question in the DM. If you want to get your question to the tippity top of the list, send me an audio question and that will go to the top of the list. So this question comes today from Alana. Alana, it's probably Alana. I don't think anyone goes by Alana. At least I hope not. But I'm going to get an email from an Alana somewhere and she's going to be very upset. Or he's going to be very upset. I don't know. I don't have any information on that. So we're going to be going over a little bit of that today. But first, this is the first episode back from the conference. For those of you all new who I met, hi there. For those of you who have followed me since then, hi there. Nice to have you for this podcast. It was what I love about. I'll tell you what I love and I hate. I told you about this last time. What I hate. I'll start with that, I suppose. It's people. People are the worst. People are the worst because I have social anxiety as well. I don't really like talking to people because I get awkward and uncomfortable and it sucks, but I do it anyways because it's what I need to do and it's important for me. Best part about it is, and this is exactly what the conference did, it's this kind of reorientation to what is to what this whole treatment thing is about. And that sounds very silly, but it's, we can get lost in all the information out there. There's a ton of information. There's podcasts, there's articles, there's YouTube videos, there are books, there are seminars, there are all sorts of things out there. And you can get very confused because everyone has their own stilt or slant or perspective and all that stuff. And all that stuff is great, but we can get lost in it and it all feels very muddled. And having something like the conference, the OCD conference, is great because you get to kind of get back to like what is the direction of OCD treatment these days? What are the centralities of things? What's the common denominator between all these things? And it really helps you to refocus. At least as a clinician, it helps me to refocus. And it did that. So this past couple of weeks has been really good for me, and as I think it has shown up in my sessions. And for anybody out there who's kind of may get their heads swirled around in a lot of different theory, that could be a good thing to do. But other than that, it's kind of fun to see a new city. Went to Chicago, which was good. Chicago is a city that one can go to. It probably wasn't my favorite, but it was fun. It was nice. It's pretty in parts, I guess. But let's be honest. I don't get to explore outside the hotel very much, but I did go to the Chicago Music Exchange, which was super fun. And I got to try a bass that was super fun. And the missus said I could not because it was $7,000. It was on sale for $7,000, but I'm not paying that much for an instrument. I'm never paying that much for an instrument. Not right now. Not yet. Not for a while. All right. So I think I'm wasting too much time. Let's jump into Alana's question. That's the reason everybody signs up, not to hear this. All right. So Alana's question goes thusly. Can you do an episode on perfectionism / just right OCD? I really struggle with this in terms of work and assignments. I don't know why the urge is so strong, but instead of writing something new, or instead of writing anything new, which I have to do to finish the essay, I will just keep rewording and rephrasing what I've already written, trying to make it sound just right. I also do things in terms of I also do this. In terms of what to include, I collect all the information and end up with too much information, and then I really struggle to organize it. It drives me nuts. I get so caught up in how is the best way to word this. It drives me insane. I genuinely feel I can't sit there and just write and finish the bloody essay your UK is showing. I ended up not finishing or submitting some assignments. People would tell me the very sensible statement to submit something is better than to not submit anything. And my head really doesn't like this. Which doesn't really make rational sense unless it's just right. It's better to not submit, and that's exactly what I do, not submit. I also notice the tendency in other areas as well. For example, with reading. I get very caught up in my head trying to make sure that I take in all the details, making sure I note down all the words I'm unfamiliar with to learn them. I also feel this caught up in my head feeling in lectures. I have lots of thoughts about not taking in all the details and not fully paying attention. I don't feel present, just stressing that I'm not taking in all the information and collecting all the details. I don't like not knowing all the answers. Many thanks. So, Alana, thank you so much for sending this question in. It's very pertinent to myself in the talks at the OCD conference. The reality is, man, there's so much information to take in, and I'll say this, unless you're recording in some sort of way, you're not going to take in all the information. And the reality is you're not taking in that information. The recorder is taking in that information. One of the hard things about being human is that we can't take in everything. And we can't memorize everything. We can't know everything. And even if we try, our brain is going to skew things and twist things and miss things and ignore things based on a lot of different bits of information, but that's what it's going to kind of do. So part of what we need to do as people is to recognize that there's a little bit of information that we will simply miss or it will twist. And that can be based on, if you're in a lecture and trying to take in information, you're going to take in information or you're going to skew it based on how the professor said it, what you felt in that moment, what you were reminded of in that moment, and that might color things. You might be distracted by that sound over there, which you missed just a hint of something. And that hint of something that they said may be innocuous or useless. But part of your brain is going to say, but what if that was the biggest, most important thing? What if that was the difference between you understanding it and not? So I want to talk a little bit about that in just a moment, but I want to point that out as just one of the realities of things. I was talking recently with a couple other therapist types, and we're talking about that urge to really be focused and pay attention to everything that our clients say. Granted, it's our job, it's what we hope to do, it's our intention to do, but just like you, we're human. And we're going to be distracted and think about that other client or that next client or that thing that we have to do on the weekend or what we're going to do on vacation or what we're going to do, just whatever. We get distracted. And then we might miss something small. But one thing that we do is we kind of piece it all together through context clues, which is one thing that can be important here. Context clues, we can kind of piece together what the person was saying, the idea of what they're saying, the thrust of what they're trying to get at, the thesis of what they're trying to say, based on all the other stuff that they were saying. Now, maybe we missed something, but that's part of the uncertainty that we're practicing sitting in, is just practicing not knowing. But I think what's really important to think about with that is what that means or that says about you, right? So one thing to remember, first off, perfectionism says that there's never enough for you. I put a post up of this on Instagram recently. I wrote an article for Psychology Today on this. But perfectionism never says that what you do is going to be enough. And it's always going to say there's a better way to say it, a clearer way to say it, a more elegant way to say it, a more straightforward way to say it. There's going to be a more emotional way to say it. There's going to be a way that's going to maybe that's going to help the other person to understand a little bit better. It's a way to make it shorter. It's a way to make it longer. And your brain would be right. There's always something else that we can do to do something better, cleaner, faster, shorter, smaller, longer, whatever it is. There's always something that we can do, but that's the problem, is there's always something we can do. Even if we put in all that work, there's always a different word we can use, or a sentence we can make just one word shorter, or a little bit more eloquent, or a little bit clearer. but at what cost? It's going to drive us, as you said, it's going to drive you insane. It's going to drive you nuts to go through that whole process, right? Our artists, musicians, whatever, have a hard time with this, creative types. It's because when you create something from nothing, it's nothing, and then it builds up into something. But at what point is it now finally something? At what point is the movie perfect? At what point is the book just right? At what point is the painting excellent? There's always another brushstroke. There's always another edit you could do. There's always another scene you could include. There's always something. Artists have to ultimately say at some point, it's done. It's good enough. And good enough is the way that we get out of perfectionism. Good enough says it's a decision that I'm making. It's not a level that I've achieved. It's a decision that I make for me and for the piece that we're working on, that it's good enough, and that we send it out. It's hard to do, but it's a necessity. Slowly over time, as the more we start to accept good enoughness and we declare it as good enough, it starts to get easier, and we start to be able to do it faster and faster. Now, there is no perfect rightness and speed in which in this, right? We're not being perfect or imperfect perfectly. We're trying to do our best, but saving you time. All right, so let me get into just a couple of things about this. Is that for you, Alana, I wonder, like, what does perfectionism mean for you? Perfectionism can mean something different for a lot of different people. I'm curious what it says about you that you have to be perfect. Brené Brown talks about perfectionism in terms of the behaviors there to protect you from the shame or the pain of something, right? So maybe it's perfectionism within school. You have to get A's all the time. So perfectionism is there to protect you against the pain of getting a B, getting an A- for that matter. So what is that pain for you? What are you worried about? Is it that some people are going to think that you're not smart, that you're not clear enough, that maybe you're not as eloquent as other people, maybe, or that you believe other people think that you are, right? Or that you put yourself out there to be, right? Maybe it means that you're going to fail, and that would say something about you or mean something about you. Maybe it's other people, again, think less of you in some sort of way. Right? You said, what was the phrase you said? I don't like knowing all the answers. I'm curious, like, why don't you like knowing all the answers? Right? What does it mean for you that you don't know all the answers? There isn't anybody out there who knows absolutely everything about everything. People are going to miss things and get things wrong. So I want you to think about what is the threat for you? If you aren't perfect, if you send in that essay, if you don't go back and write down every word, what does it say about you? What does it mean about you? Right? And that's going to be part of your target, especially as it comes to exposures. But that's also something to really consider for having compassion and having understanding and grace for yourself. You're out there like the rest of us trying to do our best. And sometimes we're going to fail because we're human. And the part of this, the exposure part of this, is to give yourself that permission to be human, which means sometimes making mistakes and having it not be perfect. But there's a threat underneath that for you. So that's something that I would encourage you to consider and talk about with a therapist. So, like with everything, I'm a CBT-oriented therapist. So one thing that we would do in therapy is to look at some cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions think about it as screwed up thinking, right? It's the way that our brain twists or changes the way that we perceive ourselves or our actions or the world around us in some very specific ways. And from that, it's going to influence what we do, right? Cognitive behavioral, what our thoughts, how they influence our actions and behaviors. So there are a couple that just immediately popped into mind. I mean, black and white thinking or all or nothing thinking is a huge killer for perfectionism. For what that kind of looks like is like there's this small layer at the top that's perfect, that's done, that's right. And then everything else underneath that is fail, right? It's all or nothing. It is right or it is wrong. And that's a problem because for a thing like an essay, when is it perfect? How is it? By what metric? How is it right? By my metric? By your metric? By your professors? By your mom? By your dad's? Everyone's going to be a little bit different. And that's part of the problem with this wiggly aspect, right? But there's this feeling in you that says, well, it's got to be perfect. But remember, your brain knows it can never be perfect. There's always something else it's going to do. So it's going to call you out on that and ask you to put in that little bit more effort. And it's going to drive you nuts, right? So all or nothing thinking. Should statements. There's a rule here for you. Should statements say, there is a right and a wrong way to do things, and there is a right way for you to do it. I should turn in a perfect essay. I should know everything. I should know all the answers. I should know all the words. I should be able to pick up everything and understand everything. Where did that rule come from for you? And what happens if that rule is broken, right? So there's a story in there that you need to uncover and consider for yourself and challenge for yourself, because if you don't, then what, right? How often, in this rule, is that something from growing up? Is that something that helped protect you from getting that B or that fail? Is that something that helped you maintain reputation? Is that something that helped other people just be happy with you or give you attention? I don't know, but there's this rule that was developed that ultimately is no longer serving you. It needs to be rethought. Lastly, magnifying is one of those things. So magnifying just kind of takes this one little thing and kind of puts the spotlight on it and says, this is the most important thing. And it blows it up out of proportion, that this thing is now the most important thing in your life. Right. And maybe that's getting the A, maybe that's knowing something. And for right there, maybe it's that paper that you have. Like, that's the most important thing in your life, as if everything hinges on that one paper. If it's not done right, then what? Right. So are there other things in life that are more important than that? Is this paper the most important thing in life? Or is it perhaps just like one of the things? I'm willing to bet it's just one of the things, right? Is there any evidence to suggest also that getting the B is the worst thing, that other people do judge you, criticize you, reject you, think less of you because of that? Is there any evidence to say that really bad things, not, hey, it sucks that I got the B, anything bad that happens because of it? Or did things they're fine, but they just kind of suck? Or it kind of stings to not get that A? Which one is it? And you can consider that. And this is part of the alternative thought record exercise that a lot of people, myself included, do within treatment. And I encourage you to kind of look that up, or if you're working with a therapist on this, kind of talk with them about the ways that you can challenge these narratives, these stories, and these rules that you've got about this perfectionism and what's going on with it. So, when you were writing it, it made me start to think about or reflect on something a professor that I had back in the day used to say. This is a professor who, I was doing research for. I was helping him in his research, and he was giving me some advice on stuff like when you start to read things and gather information for it, that there's always another article that kind of says the same thing, or more articles that talk about a certain subject. You can get really focused in on one thing, but you kind of miss out on the broader narrative of the rest of it. Right. So his advice to me was actually, I think, really helpful. And it was like when you're reading and gathering information for your articles or for your essays, as it were, when you start to read that, kind of similar information or that same information, it's kind of, you've seen it in a couple different places. He said, move on. Move on to the next thing. Move on to the next topic or part of the essay or part of the information you're trying to gather, so that you can not get just locked into one thing, but that you can expand and have other things. Because again, when you start to read it, maybe you've read it, maybe you've gotten that information. I think that might be some helpful advice when you're fighting against this idea that you've got to gather all this information or too much information. And again, I think that taps into that worry of, oh man, what if I miss something? What if I don't do it right? All right. So what do you do about this? How can you help fix this? How can you help work on this? Well, number one with everything is catch yourself in what your compulsions are, right? We've talked about exposure and response prevention when it comes to perfectionism or kind of just right before, with all manner of OCD and anxiety. But the compulsions are drive the whole cycle. right? So that's the number one place where we want to try to cut out, because it's the one thing we can control. We can't control the urge to be perfect. We can't control the thought that maybe we're not going to be perfect, but we can always control our actions around those things. And that's what we're trying to target and hone in on. So the first thing that I want you to think about are, what are the compulsions that you do? Is it going back and rereading that essay? Is it spending excessive amounts of time? I know that's a wiggly word, but spending excessive amounts of time really looking at, like, trying to find the right word. How many dictionaries and thesauruses that you've looked at to try to find just that right word? Do you give your articles to, or your essays to, friends and parents and other people to try to confirm or try to, like, get information about whether or not it's the right thing, or whether or not it's done, right? We want to be catching ourselves on those and then pulling back on them. My computer is freaking out because this video is going crazy long. All right, so let's be quick about this then. All right, so here's what I would love for you to practice doing. First, catching yourselves in the compulsions. Secondly, I want you to start looking. You can do a couple of things trying to practice imperfection, right? Write emails as a first draft, resisting rereading, texting people, first draft, not rereading that, right? Intentionally, you can also include texts or emails with errors in it. Make it wrong, make it weird. Papers, give yourself a deadline with it. Submit and then submit right when that deadline hits. Maybe even have a friend or a therapist submit that for you. Lastly, you can watch a show with kind of like a single headphone in. And then with that single headphone in, you're going to miss something. You can read something while you're watching something. Practice being distracted and practice having that feeling that, it's not quite right or you're missing something. Sit with that feeling, note that it's there, and practice being okay with that. It's going to take time and it's going to take practice, but those are some things you can intentionally do to lean into it. So my computer is about to explode with the amount of time I'm trying something new with recording, and it's taking up so much space. This video is 25 gigabytes in size. I'm going to make some changes to it. But anyways, Alana, thank you so much for sending this in. I hope this brief answer was helpful. But again, what I encourage you to do, take a risk and challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com, or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.